For 500,000 years, the Vorlax Dominion ruled the stars. Their empire stretched across thousands of galaxies, shining like a crown of fire in the endless dark. They were tall, strong, and terrifying to behold, creatures of silver armor and black eyes that never showed mercy. Wherever they went, destruction followed. They were not born to build. They were born to conquer. And in all those long ages, not once had they known defeat. Entire civilizations had fallen before them. Some begged for peace, others fought until their worlds turned to ash, but it never changed the end. The Vorlax always won. Their war fleets were unmatched, their soldiers fearless, their minds sharp and cold. They believed themselves to be chosen by destiny itself, perfect, eternal, untouchable. Their history books did not record losses. Their songs did not speak of sorrow. They had no word for mercy. To be Vorlax was to be unstoppable, and to stand against them was to die. Every child of their race was raised to believe one truth above all. The Vorlax never lose. When the last of the ancient empires fell, the Supreme Commander, Zorva the Eternal, stood before his people and declared, "We are the masters of creation. There is no power greater than the Vorlax Dominion." His words were carried by lightning through the stars, echoed in every world under their control. None dared to question him. None dared to dream otherwise. But fate has a strange way of humbling those who forget compassion. In the year 742-101 of the Dominion era, a new report came from the Outer Rim. A planet, small and blue, spinning quietly around a yellow star. The scouts called it Earth. It had oceans, forests, and cities. Its people were fragile-looking creatures made of soft flesh, not metal. Their technology was primitive compared to the Vorlax. Their weapons old, their ships small, their armies weak. Zorva laughed when he saw the first images. "Is this what dares to exist beyond our reach?" he said with cruel amusement. "Send them a message. Let them know who rules the stars." So the Vorlax sent their first transmission to Earth. A voice of thunder carried through the void. "This is the Vorlax Dominion. You stand in the path of gods. Kneel and live as servants. Resist and be erased." The humans, simple and proud, answered after a day of silence. Their message was calm, polite, and peaceful. "We are explorers, not enemies. We seek friendship, not war." The court of Zorva laughed for an entire hour. "They speak of friendship," the commander sneered. "That means they are weak." The High Lords of the Dominion agreed. To them, mercy was a flaw and peace was a sign of fear. They prepared their fleets, ready to add another world to their long list of conquered planets. But deep in the heart of the Vorlax Armada, one old general, Reth Khan, spoke quietly to his commander. "We should study them first," he warned. "Every species has something to teach us, even the small ones." Zorva dismissed him with a wave. "You are too old, Reth Khan. We are the lesson. The universe learns from us." And so the fleet departed, a storm of golden ships moving through the darkness. Planets trembled when the Vorlax passed by. Suns dimmed beneath their shadows. And among the stars they carried with them the same arrogance that had guided their kind for hundreds of thousands of years. When the Vorlax ships reached Earth's orbit, they expected panic. They expected humans to run, to hide, to surrender. But the blue planet remained calm. No surrender. No cries for mercy, only silence. "Strange," murmured one Vorlax officer as he watched the human transmissions. "They are not afraid." Zorva smiled coldly. "Then we will teach them fear." And with that command, the first shot of energy burned through the clouds, striking a great human city and turning it to dust. Millions died in an instant. The Vorlax recorded it as another victory, another demonstration of their unstoppable power. But far below, among the ruins and smoke, a small group of humans stood together. They did not cry. They did not beg. They looked up at the burning sky, at the massive ships floating above their world, and whispered only one promise to themselves: "We are still here." Those words carried across every surviving radio, Every dark shelter, every underground base. The world had been attacked, but the human spirit was not broken. And when Jorva heard that same message echo back to his fleet, calm, steady, and full of defiance, something inside him stirred. For the first time in 500,000 years, he felt a flicker of unease. He didn't understand it then, but history would remember that moment as the beginning of the end. Because the Vorlax dominion, undefeated for 500,000 years, had just met a species that did not know how to surrender. They had just met humans. The Vorlax fleet hung like a shadow over Earth, massive ships blotting out the sun. From orbit, the planet looked small, fragile, and insignificant, a mere toy in the hands of the invincible Dominion. Their weapons glowed with terrible energy, ready to reduce the blue world to nothing. The Vorlax soldiers expected panic, screams, and instant surrender, but what greeted them was silence. On the surface, humans did not scatter. They did not kneel. They watched. They prepared. Entire cities evacuated. Yet families stayed in shelters and people from all walks of life came together to help each other. The soldiers of the Vorlax could not understand it. These creatures were fragile, soft, and small. A single Vorlax could crush them with one hand. Yet here they were, calm, unbroken, and defiant. The first Vorlax general to land, Rokthal, strode across the scorched remains of a human city. He had expected fear, trembling, and surrender. Instead, he saw humans standing together, their faces streaked with ash and dirt, but their eyes clear and unflinching. They met him not with cries, but with silence and courage. Rokthal roared in anger. "Do you not fear death?" he demanded, his voice shaking the air. One human, a young woman with hair tied in a simple braid, stepped forward. She did not raise a weapon, but she did not run. She spoke softly, but every word struck like a hammer. "We are not afraid. We will not kneel. You may destroy our cities, but you cannot destroy our spirit." The Vorlax soldiers laughed. Strength, technology, and weapons. This was all they knew. Spirit? That was nothing. So the war began. The Vorlax unleashed their full power. Ships fired across oceans. Entire cities were reduced to rubble in moments. Energy beams scorched forests and the skies turned red with fire. Millions died in the first weeks. By every measure, the humans were weak, fragile, hopeless. Yet they did not surrender. They did not flee. The survivors pulled together. Fishermen, teachers, engineers, and children, they all became soldiers. They repaired ships, crafted weapons, and organized defenses with astonishing speed. Every battle they lost became a lesson. Every defeat became fuel for the next stand. In orbit, Zorva watched the humans carefully. At first he saw them as pests, irritating, foolish, unworthy of attention. But the more he observed, the more the images disturbed him. They were rising from ruins faster than any Vorlax logic allowed. They were repairing what had been destroyed overnight. They were laughing, joking, comforting each other in the middle of chaos. "How can they fight like this?" Zorva asked his generals. "Every city is gone. Every fleet is burned. Yet they stand. Why do they not break?" Rethkan, the old general, replied quietly, "Perhaps, Commander, they do not fight for cities. They fight for something greater. For each other. For hope." Zorva turned sharply. "Hope? Hope cannot stop plasma fire or destroy fleets. They will learn soon enough." But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, strange things began to happen. Human ships, smaller, slower, weaker, began ambushing Vorlax patrols with precision no one expected. Human pilots maneuvered their craft with daring, risking everything to protect civilians or disable enemy vessels. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand with a bravery that defied reason. They charged Vorlax fortresses, shouting words no alien tongue could understand. And still, they survived. In one battle, a squad of 10 human soldiers boarded a Vorlax cruiser twice their size. Outnumbered, outgunned, the humans fought like lions. One by one they fell. Yet their captain, bleeding and battered, raised the human flag before the ship's engines exploded, signaling victory to those still fighting outside. Jorva stared at the transmission in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "This species cannot survive like this. They are weak." Rethkan shook his head. "No, Commander. They are stronger than you imagine. Their strength is not in their bodies or their weapons. It is in their hearts. They do not fight to kill. They fight to protect. That we have forgotten." The Vorlax began to feel a strange unease, a doubt that had never touched them before. Their undefeated streak, stretching over 500,000 years, seemed suddenly fragile. What if victory was not guaranteed? What if these humans, these small, fragile creatures, could somehow endure what no empire had ever endured? On the streets below, humans carried each other through fire and smoke. They rescued survivors, built barricades, and organized defenses with unmatched courage. Even children helped, bringing water, tending to the wounded, and delivering messages. Every action, no matter how small, was filled with defiance. And then the humans sent a simple message to the Vorlax fleet: "We are still here." The words were calm, unshakable, and clear. They echoed in the Vorlax communication channels like a thunderclap. For the first time, Zorva felt it, the weight of a species that refused to bow, that refused to break, that refused to die quietly. He clenched his fists. "Then we will show them fear," he growled. But deep inside, even he knew something had changed. The humans were not just surviving. They were fighting back, and the world that had known only victory for 500,000 years had just met a force unlike any other. The first battle was over, but the war had only begun, and for the first time in Vorlax history, fear, however small, had entered the hearts of the undefeated. The war between the Vorlax and humans spread across the stars like wildfire. Entire systems became battlefields. Planets that had never seen war now burned under the shadow of the Vorlax fleet. The humans were fewer in number, their ships smaller and weaker, but their hearts were like steel. Every loss only made them stronger. Every setback only fueled their determination. The Vorlax had fought countless enemies before. Empires had fallen in days. Civilizations had surrendered in fear. Yet no one had ever resisted like the humans. Their defiance was not just stubbornness. It was something deeper. A refusal to be erased, a will to survive against impossible odds. On the planet Erythra, a major battle unfolded. The Vorlax dropped fire upon human cities. They expected surrender. Instead, they met human soldiers standing on the ruins, guns in hand, eyes burning with courage. One human officer, barely 20 years old, led his troops through explosions and smoke. They charged at Vorlax war machines armed only with courage and simple weapons, yet somehow they survived. And somehow, they won small victories that no one expected. In orbit, Zorva could not understand it. His generals reported losses that should have been impossible. Ships were destroyed by weaker opponents. Soldiers were killed, but others filled their places instantly. Entire fleets were attacked by humans using tactics the Vorlax had never seen before. The humans did not follow logic or predictability. They adapted, they improvised, and they fought with a single-minded purpose that defied reason. Rethkan, the old Vorlax general, watched a battle unfold from the command ship. He whispered to the commander, "They fight for each other. That is why they cannot be broken." Jorva slammed his fist against the console. "This is impossible. They are weak. They cannot survive against us." Rethkan looked at him calmly. "Commander, strength is not always measured in power or weapons. Sometimes it is measured in courage. And these humans, they have courage beyond comprehension." The war dragged on for years. Whole worlds turned to ash, but the humans kept coming. They rebuilt their cities, repaired their fleets, and trained new soldiers faster than the Vorlax could destroy them. Each victory the Vorlax claimed seemed temporary. Each human loss was replaced by 2 more willing fighters, ready to take the fight further. The Vorlax soldiers began whispering among themselves. "Why do they not fear us?" one asked. "They are not afraid of death," another answered. They fight even when hope is gone. One particular battle in the Nebula of Crystals became legendary. 10 human ships faced a Vorlax destroyer more than 10 times their size. The humans knew they could not win, yet they attacked. They dodged the Vorlax beams, struck at weak points, and caused critical damage before being destroyed. But the Vorlax ship was crippled, and the human sacrifice saved countless other human vessels. Back on Earth, civilians listened to transmissions of battles they could not see. Children learned the names of heroes they would never meet. Teachers told stories of bravery and hope, planting courage into the hearts of every new generation. Even in hiding, humans continued to resist, to build, to fight. Jorva's anger grew with each passing day. The Vorlax had never faced an enemy like this. Every calculation failed, every strategy crumbled, and the most frightening part? The humans seemed to grow stronger, braver, and more united with every attack. "Commander," Rethkon said one night as they observed a human counterattack, "you taught us that no enemy can survive. You taught us we are invincible. But these humans, they are different. Their strength is not in their fleets or weapons. It is in their spirit, and that we cannot destroy." Jorva stared silently at the stars. For the first time he felt a shadow in his heart. Fear. Not of defeat exactly, but of something worse. The realization that there might be a force in the universe that could never be broken. On a human battlefield, a small squad of survivors watched the sky burn as Vorlax ships rained down fire. One young soldier whispered to his brother, "We cannot stop them alone." The older brother placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight together. That is how we survive. That is how we win." And so they charged again into impossible odds. The Vorlax could not understand it. Every loss they inflicted on humanity seemed meaningless. Every victory was temporary. Humans did not yield. Humans did not break. Humans did not fear. In the heart of space, Jorva finally admitted what he could not say aloud to his fleet. "We have never faced an enemy like this. Perhaps, and we never will again." The humans had changed the game. They had proven that victory was not about power. It was about heart. And that heart, unyielding, fearless, and unstoppable, was something the Vorlax had never known. The war continued, and with each passing day, the Vorlax began to feel it. The first tremors of doubt in 500,000 years of undefeated pride, because the humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for each other, for hope, and for something greater than any empire had ever known. And that made all the difference. The war had raged for years, leaving countless worlds scarred and silent. Entire human colonies were destroyed, yet their fleets never stopped coming. Every battle, every loss, every explosion seemed only to make them stronger. To the Vorlax, this defiance was incomprehensible. They had conquered the greatest civilizations of the galaxy, yet these humans refused to bow, refused to vanish. In the Vorlax command ship orbiting Terra Prime, Jorva studied the transmissions from the front lines. Human ships were smaller, their weapons weaker, but they were everywhere, striking, surviving, and disappearing again like shadows. Entire Vorlax fleets had been ambushed by only a handful of human pilots. Ships that should have been lost were repaired overnight. Colonies that were reduced to ash were rebuilt in weeks. Rethkon, the old general, watched silently beside him. "They are not just surviving, Commander. They are learning faster than we can destroy. Their strength is beyond anything we have ever known." Jorva slammed his claw against the console. "No, this is impossible. They cannot continue like this. We are the undefeated. This cannot happen." But deep in the command room, even he knew that something had shifted. The humans' courage was a force the Vorlax could not calculate. It was raw, unyielding, and unstoppable. Their spirit was stronger than any weapon, sharper than any strategy, and fiercer than any fleet. On the planet Veyron 9, a human colony was under siege. The Vorlax fleet descended like a storm of fire, expecting surrender. Buildings crumbled under the first bombardment. Entire armies were wiped out. But the human survivors did not flee. They rose from the ashes, dug into the ruins, and struck the Vorlax in ways no one had anticipated. Civilians became soldiers. Engineers rigged traps. Teachers led squads into battle. Children carried messages and supplies across the battlefield. Every person fought not for glory, not for empire, but for each other. A young human captain, barely 19, rallied his squad through the burning streets. We may be small, but together we are strong. Hold the line. Their weapons were simple, their numbers few. Yet they caused chaos among the Vorlax troops. By the time the battle ended, half of the invading fleet was damaged or destroyed. The humans had won a victory that should have been impossible. When the report reached Zorva, he stared at the data in silence. "This is madness," he whispered. "They should be dead. They should be gone." "How?" Rethkan's voice was soft, almost sad. "Because they fight for something we lost long ago, Commander. They fight for love, for family, for hope. They fight for each other. That you cannot destroy." The Supreme Commander turned away, rage and fear warring in his heart. For the first time in his 500,000-year reign, he doubted. Not his soldiers, not his fleets, not his weapons, but himself. He doubted that victory was certain. He doubted that invincibility still belonged to the Vorlax. Meanwhile, across the war-torn galaxies, humans continued to rise. Every fallen planet birthed new resistance. Every defeated fleet created new tactics. Entire generations learned the lessons of sacrifice and courage from those who came before. And even when death took them, it became a symbol, a story, a spark to ignite the next wave of defenders. On one small, shattered moon, a group of humans stood together, watching the Vorlax fleet above. Their leader, bloodied and exhausted, turned to the others. "We cannot win by strength alone, but we can win by refusing to give up. Every time we rise, every time we fight, we teach them that we are not afraid. That is our weapon." And it worked. The Vorlax could destroy cities, ships, even entire colonies, but they could not destroy human courage. They could not destroy hope. Every calculated strategy failed. Every logical plan was broken by the unyielding will of a species they considered weak. Zorva felt it then, a chill he had never known in his life. The humans were not just fighting back. They were teaching the Vorlax something they had forgotten in their endless conquest. That power was not always in weapons. That victory was not always in strength. That true greatness sometimes came from the heart. For the first time, the invincible Vorlax felt the weight of fear. Not fear of death, but fear of being outmatched in a way that had nothing to do with size, strength, or technology. These humans had something no empire had ever had, a spirit that refused to break, a unity that could not be destroyed, and a courage that would not die. And in that realization, the tide of the war began to shift. From the ashes of destroyed worlds, the humans rose again and again, their voices echoing across the void. "We are still here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every life lost, every city destroyed, every battle survived. And for the Vorlax, they carried an unbearable truth. The undefeated could be challenged. The unbeatable could be faced. And the invincible could finally understand fear. The turning point had come, because the humans were no longer just surviving. They were rising. They were learning. They were fighting. And the Vorlax had never faced anything like them before. The Vorlax Supreme Fleet gathered above Earth for the final strike. It was the largest force the galaxy had ever seen. A storm of golden ships, each bristling with energy weapons capable of annihilating entire continents. The Supreme Commander, Zorva, stared down at the blue planet with cold, unshakable confidence. After 500,000 years of undefeated conquest, this world would fall like all the rest. Humanity, he believed, would finally kneel. But humanity had already begun to write a different story. Deep underground, across ruined cities and secret bunkers, humans worked tirelessly. Engineers repaired damaged ships, scientists activated defense arrays, and soldiers prepared for the impossible. Families gave their last food and water to those who would fight. Even children carried messages and tended to the wounded. Every corner of Earth pulsed with determination, a quiet heartbeat of courage that could not be destroyed by fire or fear. The Vorlax began their attack. Energy beams sliced through the skies. Cities burned, oceans boiled. Entire fleets were obliterated. Yet, even in the face of unimaginable destruction, humans fought back. They struck with small, fast ships, launching daring attacks that the Vorlax did not anticipate. They sabotaged weapons, disrupted fleets, and created chaos among the invincible forces. One human captain, Ilara Voss, led a squad of 10 ships into the heart of the Vorlax fleet. Their vessels were fragile, their weapons weak, but their minds were sharp and their courage unmatched. They struck at the supply lines, crippled Vorlax cruisers, and rescued civilians trapped in collapsing cities. Every maneuver was precise, every action deliberate, yet risky beyond measure. They were ordinary people, armed only with hope and unbreakable will, challenging the mightiest empire the universe had ever known. Jorva watched the transmissions with disbelief. His fleet, undefeated for 500,000 years, was faltering before creatures so small, so fragile, so utterly human. "Impossible," he growled. "We cannot be defeated by this species. They are weak." Rethkan, the old general, looked at him calmly. "Commander," he said quietly, "they are not weak. They are stronger than anything we have ever faced. Their strength comes from their hearts. You cannot destroy that." The Vorlax struck harder. Ships fired with deadly precision. Entire cities vanished in minutes. Yet the humans kept rising. Even after loss, even after death, they did not stop. They rebuilt. They reorganized. They attacked again, using ingenuity and courage that no weapon could erase. Then came the final human plan, a weapon not of destruction, but of brilliance. Humanity unleashed a galactic signal, a pulse of energy and information that infiltrated the Vorlax fleet systems. Ships turned against each other. Weapons malfunctioned. The once invincible fleet became chaos incarnate. Jorva roared in fury as his ships began to collapse from within. "This is not possible. We are undefeated." On the surface, humans watched as the massive Vorlax ships erupted into fire. Captain Ilara Voss sent a simple message across the galactic channels. "You were undefeated." "Not anymore." The words echoed across the stars. For the first time in 500,000 years, the Vorlax dominion had lost. Entire fleets fell. Command structures collapsed. Their pride, their arrogance, their belief in their invincibility, all shattered in the face of humanity's spirit. The surviving Vorlax looked on in disbelief. They could not understand. They had destroyed countless civilizations, conquered billions of lives, and yet, this species had turned everything upside down. They had fought not for power, not for empire, not for conquest, but for hope, for courage, for each other. Rethkan spoke softly to the Supreme Commander. "Perhaps, Commander, you have underestimated the power that comes from unity and heart. They fight for each other, not for themselves. That is something even we cannot conquer." Jorva fell silent. For the first time, the weight of defeat pressed on his immortal shoulders. The humans had done what no species could do. They had not only survived the mightiest empire in history, they had broken it. Across the galaxy, survivors of the human forces began to rebuild. They rescued prisoners, helped the wounded, and offered mercy to their enemies. They did not celebrate with arrogance. They did not exult in pride. They acted with courage, compassion, and hope, traits that had carried them through centuries of impossible battles. On Earth, people gathered under the ruins of their cities. They mourned the dead, but they also looked to the sky with renewed strength. Humanity had won, not because of superior weapons, not because of strategy, but because they had refused to break. They had refused to bow. They had refused to accept that the undefeatable could not be challenged. Jorva retreated to the void of space, defeated, humiliated, and shaken to his core. For the first time in 500,000 years, he felt fear, fear of a species he could not destroy, fear of a power he did not understand. And in that fear, the humans had won. The galaxy would remember this day, not as a day of war, but as a day when courage overcame invincibility. A day when the undefeatable were defeated, not by strength, but by heart. Because humanity had shown something the universe had never seen before. Even the greatest power cannot withstand the will of those who refuse to be broken. The war was over. The Vorlak's supreme fleet, once a storm of unstoppable power, lay shattered across the stars. Fires burned on countless worlds. Cities that had been symbols of human resilience were scarred, yet still stood. The survivors, battered and weary, looked up at the sky and saw not invaders, but the dawn of a new era. Humanity had won, but the victory was not easy. Millions had died, entire fleets had been destroyed. Families had been torn apart, and yet amidst the ruins the humans found hope. They rebuilt not with hatred but with courage. They helped one another, comforted the wounded, and even reached out to those who had once sought to destroy them. The surviving Vorlaks, floating in broken ships and orbiting ruined planets, could not comprehend it. For centuries they had believed that power and fear were the only truths in the universe. Strength was measured in weapons, dominance in fleets, victory in destruction. And yet here were humans, the weakest-looking creatures in the galaxy, showing mercy to those who had tried to erase them. One young Vorlak soldier, Kreltan, drifted aboard a damaged ship, staring at the human transmissions beaming across space. Humans were bringing food, medicine, and supplies to planets the Vorlaks had conquered. They were rebuilding cities. They were saving lives. They were offering hope where there had only been fear. He did not understand. He could not understand. A human medic, standing amidst the rubble of a destroyed city, received a Vorlak soldier who had been gravely wounded. The alien's armor was scorched, his body broken, and yet he did not fight. He waited, unsure, afraid. The medic looked him in the eye and said softly, "We do not hate you. We only wish to survive. We will help you." For the first time, Kreltan felt something he had never known. Gratitude, not fear. Care, not cruelty. The humans were not just victorious. They were kind. They were brave. They were extraordinary. Even Zorva, the Supreme Commander, could not escape the reality of his defeat. He had been undefeated for 500,000 years. Entire galaxies had bent to his will. Empires had surrendered before his name. And yet humanity had shattered everything he believed. They had won not because they were stronger, faster, or smarter, but because they refused to break. Because they fought for each other, for hope, for a future. In the aftermath, the humans sent messages across the stars, not of conquest, but of peace. They rebuilt Vorlak's colonies. They offered aid to the defeated. They welcomed anyone willing to live without war. Rethkon, the old general who had survived the final battle, watched the humans carefully. "Commander," he said quietly to Zorva, "this species, they fight for what is right, not what is easy. That is why they won. And that is why they will endure." Zorva remained silent. He could not deny the truth. The humans' victory was not just in defeating the Vorlak's fleet. Their victory was in showing the galaxy a power the Vorlaks had never known, the power of courage, mercy, and unity. On Earth, people gathered in the ruins of cities. They mourned the dead, but they also celebrated life. They rebuilt schools, hospitals, and homes. They honored the heroes who had fallen, the families who had been lost, and the courage that had carried them through impossible odds. And far above the clouds, remnants of the Vorlak's fleet watched silently. They had not expected compassion. They had not expected forgiveness. They had not expected humans to rise again and again, to offer mercy even when they had been attacked with unimaginable force. A young Vorlak soldier, kneeling beside the ruins of his ship, asked a human officer, "Why? Why help us after all we did?" The human smiled gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because we know what it is to lose everything, and we will not let anyone feel that again." Not if we can help it. It was a lesson that would echo across the universe. The Vorlax had once been unstoppable. They had once believed themselves eternal. And yet humanity had shown them the most powerful force in existence. Not weapons, not fleets, not conquest, but the courage to rise, the will to protect and the heart to forgive. Across the galaxy, stories of the humans spread. Planets that had once feared the Vorlax now whispered tales of the species that refused to bow. Children learned of heroes who fought against impossible odds. Leaders remembered that courage was stronger than tyranny. And the universe, vast and dark, began to see a new kind of light. The war was over. The humans had survived. The Vorlax had learned humility. And the galaxy would never be the same. Because the humans had not only won battles, they had won hearts, changed minds, and proven that the greatest power in the universe was not in domination, but in the strength to rise after every fall. Years passed. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear. The once mighty Vorlax dominion, undefeated for 500,000 years, had been humbled. Their fleets were broken. Their cities, once symbols of invincibility, lay in ruin. And yet the survivors were still alive, still learning, still watching the humans. The species that had changed the course of history. Humanity had not just won the war. They had rewritten the rules of the universe. They did not enslave or destroy the defeated. They rebuilt. They healed. They taught the Vorlax to see a truth long forgotten. That true strength is not in domination, but in courage, compassion, and unity. On Earth, new generations grew up hearing stories of the war. They learned about bravery in the face of impossible odds, about families who had risked everything to save one another, and about leaders who had inspired hope when all seemed lost. Monuments were built, not just to honor those who had fallen, but to remind everyone what it meant to fight with heart. Among the survivors of the Vorlax, something remarkable happened. The young soldiers who had once sought only conquest began to question. They watched humans care for the wounded, share food with strangers, and rebuild cities they had tried to destroy. They could not understand it, yet they felt it. The stirrings of respect, of awe, of something like hope. Krelton, the Vorlax soldier who had once watched humans in disbelief, now walked among them. He saw children playing in fields once burned to ash. He saw engineers rebuilding ships not for war but for exploration. And he saw humans smiling, laughing, living, even after everything they had endured. For the first time he wondered what it meant to truly survive, not just exist. Jorva, the supreme commander, remained in the shadows, silent and humbled. For 500,000 years he had believed in the invincibility of the Vorlax, and yet he had been wrong. He had been defeated not by weapons or strategy, but by something he could not measure, something he could not destroy. The human heart. The Vorlax began to adapt, slowly. They learned to build rather than burn, to heal rather than destroy, to protect rather than conquer. It was not easy. Centuries of pride and arrogance were hard to erase, but they remembered the humans. A species so fragile yet so unbreakable, so small, yet capable of changing the universe. And they followed their example. Across the galaxy, humans continued to explore, to connect, to teach. They shared knowledge with former enemies. They opened communication with distant planets. They helped those in need, no matter who they were. And everywhere they went, stories of their courage spread. Planets that had trembled at the name of the Vorlax now whispered stories of the humans. Heroes who had refused to kneel, who had fought against impossible odds, who had shown the universe that even the weakest could rise to greatness. On a distant world, a statue stood tall, a human soldier reaching a hand toward a young Vorlax. At its base were engraved the words, "They were undefeated for 500,000 years until they faced humans, and found something greater than victory." Every race in the galaxy came to see it. They came to remember that strength is not measured in fleets or weapons, but in courage, hope, and the will to rise again after every fall. And humanity, as it always had, did not boast. They simply continued to live, to fight for what was right and to inspire others to do the same. The galaxy learned that true greatness is not about who rules, but about who stands when the odds are impossible, who protects when the world is in flames, and who cares when all seems lost. Even centuries later, the story of the humans and the Vorlax remained alive in every corner of the stars. Young Vorlax soldiers learned about the courage of humanity. Human children learned about the resilience of their ancestors. And every species in between learned that the greatest power in the universe is not fear or strength, but heart. Jorva, now old and silent, would sometimes stare at the sky and wonder. He had been undefeated for hundreds of millennia, yet he had been humbled by a single species. He had learned finally what the universe had always tried to teach the Vorlax. Power is fleeting. Pride is fragile. But courage, hope, and heart, they are eternal. And so the galaxy moved forward. The Vorlax rebuilt their world. Humans continued to explore the stars, and every life, no matter how small or fragile, carried within it the lesson that had changed the course of history. Even the undefeated can be challenged. Even the strongest can learn. And the heart of humanity can change the universe. The legacy of the humans would never fade. It was written not in fire or conquest, but in the courage to rise, the mercy to forgive, and the strength to keep going when all seemed lost. And that legacy would echo through the stars forever.